Welcome, everyone, to the Asian Voices Radio podcast, where you'll find Asian American conversations, including the topics you were too afraid to ask your Asian parents. I'm Sheena Yap Chan, and I'll be your host for today's show. And today we have not one, but two amazing guests today, and they are actress filmmaker Georgina Tolentino and historical consultant and scholar Alex Fabros. Welcome to the show, guys. Really excited to have you here. Maybe share a little bit about who you are and how you started your career.
Let's say that when you flunk out of college, all of a sudden you get all kinds of lemons. And so you spend the rest of your life trying to make lemonade out of it. I ended up as a migrant field worker for a couple of years because I just didn't like being in college. I experienced strikes in Tolentino in 65. I volunteered for the U.S. Marine Corps in 65 also. Spent 6 years with the Marines, sometime in Vietnam. Got out, bought a 30-foot sailboat, went sailing off to Hawaii and Tahiti. I always wanted to sail off into the sunset. Got tired of paradise and came back to Hawaii and then enlisted in the Army. And in 1992, I retired as an Army officer. I thought I was going to be retired, but I met this guy called Professor Dan Gonzalez out of San Francisco State, and he offered me an opportunity to teach at San Francisco State. And you have to remember, by this time, I still didn't have a BA degree. So the dean said he'd keep me if I got a master's, which I completed in 1 year. And then on my way to completing that, I picked up a scholarship to go to UC Santa Barbara to study U.S. history. And my fields of study were going to be Asian American, labor history, and global war and terrorism. I enjoyed teaching, enjoyed doing the research. And one of the best instructors I had was my father, because he basically was a journalist in the 1930s in California. And he covered everything about the Filipinos. And through him, I learned about the Watsonville riots, the Exeter riots, the labor strikes in California in the 1930s, the racial discrimination, everything. So he's basically my professor for about 9 years, and then he passed away. But I'm basically happy being retired. And then all of a sudden I got this request, Mr. Fabros, can I ask you some questions? And a couple of months later, what you see is a product that Georgina and Randall put together, which I thought was pretty darn good. I'd give it an A+. It was one of my classes.
Awesome. Georgina, would love to hear a little bit more about you too and how you started as an actress and filmmaker.
My story isn't as exciting as Alex's, but I was born and raised in San Francisco, and I grew up always wanting to perform, and I felt that it wasn't necessarily the most encouraged, but I also had a love for history, and so throughout high school, I would do little plays here and there, and always take it as a side exploration, but not something I would do as a hobby, not necessarily as a career, because in my parents' perspective, it wasn't necessarily something viable or that they saw. And when I went to actually UC Santa Barbara, I studied art history, and I just really always loved culture. And again, would always still do acting and all of that on the side. But when my dad got sick in college, I kind of realized, you know what, life is short, and I don't want to live my life living someone else's dream. There's always something very different. There's a different feeling that always comes out of me when I perform, when I explore. And I think that acting wasn't necessarily something I was naturally good at. It was something that I had to change about myself. I had to be more confident, basically, to be able to perform and learn different parts of myself, which I felt really drawn to. That it's not really that, oh, I'm playing someone else. I'm actually just exploring different parts of myself. And I just ended up really loving being able to find that universal common thread within all of us constantly, and making it work. And so when I moved to Los Angeles, I worked for a few production companies, Um, and then I got representation, and I kind of saw the disparity between what I was studying in my acting studio. I was doing Angels in America and plays and all this, but I was going out for roles that were a little degrading and ethnically specific. And I felt that it was part of my responsibility socially to be a part of the change rather than complain about it. I wanted to write. And so I started writing and collaborating with other filmmakers who had the same mindset and kind of using film as a form of activism and social education. Um, and I felt that this story particularly was very interesting to me. So about the Watsonville riots and um, the Central Valley drama that was going on between and tension between Filipino Americans and American laborers. So when I reached out to Alex, I felt that this was a very important story to tell, and I had no idea that any of these really deep specific stories. A lot of it isn't necessarily public, and it kind of just inspired me to just expand the story a bit more than what was really available to people. So here we are.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And I know Georgina was on my podcast a while back, and representation is always huge, right? And you mentioned the same thing. You were being casted as like those typical Asian roles that really degrade us. And like you mentioned, if we want representation, we got to go out there and do it. And I'd love to know what the title of your short film is, and kind of explain a little bit what it is about.
Yeah. So I couldn't find a title for a long time. And I remember the signs that was very disturbing to me. No dogs or Filipinos allowed. And there was several other signs that I've seen: no dogs, no Chinese, no Vietnamese, no blacks, no Hispanics. Um, and it always really kind of stuck in my mind. And so I kind of based it on that sign. And the short film is not really about that sign specifically, but it's the short film is called No Dogs. And spoiler alert, you don't see it until the end, the full sign at the end. But I think what I really wanted to uh, I really like titles of films that people don't know what it is until they watch the full thing, and I think it's very powerful. And because if I put No Dogs or Filipinos Allowed, I mean that's a very strange title, but I like the dot dot dot. And for me, that No Dogs title felt stronger once we kind of set up the story within the short film, which is two people who are stuck in a diner during uh, a true event. These are fictional characters, but the event is true about the Stockton Clubhouse, which was popular within Filipino men who were going to socialize and dance because a lot of the taxi halls were really whites only. So this is an opportunity for them to have fun, express themselves, dress up, be flashy, and a lot of white women were working there and developed relationships with some of these men because a lot of these men would come here and they the women wouldn't migrate here unless you were married to a Filipino man. And so it bothered a lot of white men because, first of all, they're taking the jobs. And second of all, it was, against their own prejudice of interracial marriage and interracial relationships and children that were what was happening. And so I thought it was very fascinating when Alex talked about this group of people called the Nightriders that caused a lot of terror within Central Valley in Southern California, and were terrorizing a lot of Asians and specifically Filipinos because Filipinos were primarily the migrant workers in the farms. And I thought, what about these two people being stuck together in a diner and having to have a conversation? Two people on opposite sides. And I like to do work that is similar to the zeitgeist today, but also has historical foundations in the past and kind of, again, a way to find relatability to today from elements of the past. So that's why I thought this idea would be very interesting because it's very relevant today.
I love it, and I definitely have to check that short film out later on because a lot of people seem to think that our community does not go through any form of racism, and that's only happening right now with Stop Asian Hate. But there has been deep-seated roots of racism in America and Canada, and it's just nobody talks about it. And showing movies like this is very important to showcase, like, yes, this did happen, and it didn't happen overnight. It's been going on for so long. So I'm really glad you're able to create this movie. Now, I'm just really curious, how did you two meet and connect and work on this project?
Georgina had put a call out for information on a specific topic, and I saw all these people replying back to her, and I said, these guys are all lightweights. They're going to send her in the wrong direction. So I reached out and I said, what topic are you working on? And if you're interested, contact me. And by the way, these are my bona fides. And I guess you checked me out. And she talked to me about her project. And I got a first draft. And, the professor in me just pops out and goes, she missed all the lectures. She might have watched the movie, but she didn't get the gist of the class. So this is a C- paper. But by the time she and I got through working together, it was an A plus. There's a lot of things that I was able to educate her about that she actually incorporated into the storyline, which was really great. What you see in 15 minutes, probably there's a good solid 5 minutes of good background history that it doesn't come out as a history lecture. It just comes out naturally between these two people talking about historical events, foundation as to why certain things happen. And at the same time, we also have the character explain who he is and what he does and where this feeling comes from. And it comes from his father. Um, he's good at doing something, but you don't know. It'd be difficult to say why he's good at it, but he explains in about maybe 10, 15 seconds. And then all of a sudden, it all ties together where Georgina uh, puts it all together and figures out, whoops, this guy is not a nice guy after all.
Yeah, when I showed this to Alex, even at the time, I just didn't. It was a bit of a disaster. The short, I went, "What is this? Is it a genre? I don't even know." It didn't make sense. But I thought I wanted two people stuck in a diner during this, and a lot of it was I just didn't know a lot of the depth of the story. A lot of it I was pulling from books or public material online, and that's the issue is that a lot of it isn't publicly available. So when I actually sat down and talked with Alex, I was really just listening. And I was listening for a few sessions of our phone calls, just listening about his life and the environment and understanding, okay, what can I pull that is going to be really meaningful within this short amount of time that can really be relatable to a lot of people. And I felt that people just aren't born thinking one way. They're just not born, oh, I hate this one group. It really is passed down. So it's not reporting some of these hate crimes. I think, they were saying that a lot of these Asian hate crimes aren't being reported because we're afraid, and culturally we are taught to be a bit more quiet and not speak up. And a lot of the short film, I felt, wanted to show why we're that way as well, how we're conditioned, and the stakes that are in front of the Filipino community, which is why we have kind of chosen, and people before us, our generation, to blend in a little bit more. Yeah, so I thought that would be a very interesting topic to cover. And I really enjoyed speaking with Alex and learning about our history more. It kind of actually helped me understand why my family is the way they are. And I think it'll help a lot of people bridge that gap between generations. And I just hope more people get to hear more of what Alex's stories are, and his research and his life's work. And I think film is a really wonderful way to educate people in a very broad sense. I mean, the positive with these streaming platforms, and it's a lot of people have them, and a lot of people in the Midwest and other areas that maybe don't have people that look like us in their communities could watch these movies and get to know and relate and have compassion and understanding with other groups that may not be in there every day. And I think that's really what's powerful about art and cinema.
Thanks so much for sharing that, and I love it. And um, I just wanted to know, like, how long did it take for you to take this idea and turn it into a film production? I know your director was also Filipino American. Was he somebody you knew beforehand, or you just kind of like reached out, kind of like when you reached out to Alex? Like, what was the whole process like?
I met Randall through a mutual friend, Jake Macabal, who is an actor in the Philippines. And we became really close friends for the past few years as colleagues and as artists. And then I met Freddie Duarte, who ended up being our director of photography for the short film, and also worked on a film with Randall with Jake called Monsters Without, which is also at the LA Asian Film Festival, premiering October 1st. And Randall and I connected, all of us all connected on Zoom. And I spoke about wanting to shoot something. And it was at the point where the script wasn't all there yet, but we were determined to shape it through. And really, the dynamic was Alex and I really focusing on getting the script to a better place. And Randall, it was very difficult because of COVID. So we would actually rehearse in a park with Randall and the other actor. And we ended up deciding that we're going to treat this as a play. We're going to rehearse this as if this was a one scene play. And so Ian and I actually would meet up on Zoom or in person in the park with masks and rehearse. And the day of the shoot, we kind of just shot it. And Randall really took charge of our limited resources to really shoot. We only shot in one night, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And there was a shoot immediately after ours on the set that we were on, the studio set. So I transformed from actress producer to PA, grabbing everything and putting it in our car, and also art department. We were all hybrids. And because of the limitation of COVID, we couldn't have that many people on set. The studio was 2 hours away. And so even makeup, I had to get my hair and makeup done before and then drive over. And, we really made it work with the limited resources. RD Media House really stepped up. Ryan Beaver and Daniel Burhane, they actually were able to help us with the equipment and filming that night. And they were all shooting and working another 12-hour shift earlier that day. So we had been awake for 24 hours shooting the short film.
So you mentioned that your film is going to be in the Los Angeles Asian Pacific Film Festival, part of the Kwentuhan program, which is premiering on October 1st. What was that like when you got, the notification or the announcement saying that was be part of it, or did you had to apply for that? Like, what was the process for that?
We submitted, and I was very anxious, and we really wanted our premiere to be at the LA Asian Pacific Film Festival, and a lot of that was because of, we shot this in March, and early March. I had written this in the fall, and then actually got COVID in January. And when I was in quarantine, I actually polished it up. And then, then I had to rest for that month. And then we were determined to shoot it in March. And then the month after was what was happening with all this Asian hate. And that's why I think it was more meaningful because a lot of emotions are coming up for all of us. Even our composer is Filipino American. She's half, and she's never really worked on a project like this, an Asian-based, Filipino American-based project. So it was very emotional for all of us to film something but not realize the social relevance that it had. And so when we got the acceptance from it, I remember Randall texted me, and I got emotional because I think during the time that we had filmed it to getting accepted, there was a lot more exploration of, I guess, honoring and owning and loving my heritage more. And then I called Alex, and I think that was what was really meaningful to me, was being able to share something that is Alex's life research and work, and to be able to collaborate and create a piece of art that's kind of both ours, and to be able to share with him that we got in was really the most meaningful part, I think, of getting the news.
Yeah, when she called me, I was really ecstatic because I've been in a lot of documentaries. A lot of documentaries have been made based on my initial research, but I've never been credited for it. Delano Monong's actually was based on a article I wrote in 2005, and we won a major Asian American award for the best historical article for that year. There's another one that's on the film circuit, the Celine Archives. It showed at the Asian Film Festival. But I wrote about that back in 1997. And it was actually that research project that got me my 5-year fellowship at UC Santa Barbara. It fully paid for a PhD program. But again, a lot of people have been using a lot of my research, but we never get credited back for it. And then Georgina, she says, would you like to work on this with me? And I figured, okay, well, she's got a good project. She just needs a little help in putting together historical context so that her characters can interact naturally as though that they knew all of this stuff to begin with. And she was able to incorporate that history into the dialogue between these two individuals, which I thought was really amazing that she was able to do that. And then out of the blue, she says, oh, by the way, you're going to get credit as historical consultant. And then later when I saw it, my wife said, you're a script writer. Where's the check? I said, don't worry about it. It's in the mail. And so, but anyway, it was enjoyable working with Georgina. This is the first time I've had a chance to really collaborate with someone that's done a project based on my work. And what I liked about working with Georgina was that I get these calls every once in a while from somebody who wants to make a movie or a film about Filipino American history. And they talk to me a couple of times, and then they drop off the radar. I have no idea. The Celine Archives was supposed to have been made into a play around 2010. That dropped off the radar. So I figured, okay, well, this is going to be another project. Well, it's fun working with her. It kills time. And then out of the blue, she completes it from start to finish. This woman is very focused on what she wants to do, and she pulls together. I thought it was really talented people. I love the soundtrack. It haunts me when I listen to it. And I like the dialogue between these people because it's an educational dialogue. You don't realize it until you get drawn into the film that you're actually being educated. You have to see it a second or a third time to figure out, okay, I've just been educated into the basics of Filipino American history, and I didn't know it. And Georgina was able to take our conversation and create this dialogue between two individuals. I mean, can you imagine what would happen if Georgina had this budget to make this, to make let's say, a short series on Filipino American history, and what she could do with it on one specific topic? It'd be a blockbuster. But again, it's Hollywood. You need money to make things happen. And hopefully someone will take a look at the project that Georgina's put together and say, hey, there's potential here for a bigger story. And I hope someone picks it up because there is potential for a bigger story. And I think it'll explain a lot of the problems we're having with hate between races. I don't know if you've seen the PBS documentary, Asian Americans. But if you look at episode 4, it's basically partly my life story, my parents' life story. And there's an incident in there when I'm about, I guess, 5 or 6 years old. The people didn't like us in that neighborhood. They tried to force us out. We got firebombed. We had windows broken. Rocks come in at 2:00 in the morning with just telling us to get the heck out of the neighborhood. They set our lawn on fire. They go to court, try to get us out of there, and then top it off, they got a dog that's chasing me all over their neighborhood. My father decides, okay, well, I'll go talk to the neighbors, and he takes that 45, a pistol, and he knocks on the door, and he tells these people, hey, this fight's between you and me. Stop screwing around with my family. And no one bothered us after he did that. So sometimes you have to be forceful. You have to step up and not say, hey, I'm afraid to do something to defend myself or my family. I do it here a lot. Someone harasses my kids when they're growing up. I went up there and I talked directly to their parents. I said, you're teaching your kids hate, and my kids are really loving girls. And so you really have to step up and you actually have to confront racism right in its track. It's not something that we can run away from. It's you've got to go full blast into them. And at my age, I just basically like to watch the young people go out there and try to create a better society.
Well, what Alex is talking about is I think a lot of people were uncomfortable with me with a gun in the film. And so I think a lot of it was the backstory of that is that I find a gun before I enter the diner on the scene. Now, we had a lot of limitations with our filming, so I don't know if it was very clear that it wasn't walking around with one in my purse. And women at the time weren't necessarily trained to use that firearms or anything like that. It was more of just grabbing it because when that bomb happened, it was a bomb that set the fire off. And people were fighting outside, Filipinos and other people. So it was very chaotic to escape. And the backstory for my specific character was that since Filipino women couldn't just immigrate here, you had to be married. She actually was. We decided to give her the backstory that she was a widow, and she. What happens is, usually back in the day, you were reliant on your husband as the provider, working in the fields, and so when you don't have that anymore, it's very difficult. So she was actually living above the clubhouse, which was also kind of like a recreational center, I believe, a community center. And it was converted into a dance hall at nighttime. And so escaping that and then a fire, like I have nowhere else to go, really. That's really my backstory. So trying to maybe find something that might protect me as I escape this, because as a woman, the stakes are very high running around at nighttime during a riot of some sort. So I think when the reveal happens of the short film of this person not being who he says he is, or being someone that is completely part of a hate group. Now, the Nightriders back in the day, I believe, Alex, they had maybe some sort of face coverings, right?
Sort of like our bandanas today.
Yeah. And they're very different from the KKK, but they were more of a vigilante kind of, not vigilante, but a hate group. They were not as organized or as had like the membership cards or their ceremonies. They just were terrorists. So when she's stuck in a diner with someone, my character slowly finds out that he's part of this group. And so there's a moment where I do pull out a gun, and I think that the reason for that and writing that in is that the gun doesn't go off. After explaining the backstory of losing my brother, losing my husband, and kind of explaining the backstory of discovering that this guy is responsible for the death of my brother. And it was loosely based off of the character of Fermin Tobera. He did not have a sister, but we fictionalized that element to give the audience something to relate to. Because if he just was someone who meant nothing to nobody, then it wouldn't be as relatable, right? I wanted to give him a little bit of life. And so finding out that he was a part of that was really symbolic in standing up for yourself and kind of confronting hate.
Thank you so much, Alex and Georgina, for sharing your story about Filipino-American history. It's definitely something I've learned as well. And, I just really want to thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us, Sheena. It's always great to be interviewed by you and talk to you. And it was an honor to work with Alex. So I hope that you all can check out nodogsfilm.com for future screenings. Thank you.
To learn more about Georgina's work, please visit georginatolentino.com. If you have any suggestions for future topics, we'd love to hear from you. Also, be sure to subscribe as well as follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please join us next week for another exciting and thought-provoking Asian Voices radio show. Until next week, I'm Sheena Yap Chan. I'd like to thank you for listening. Take care until then, everyone.